The Ukrainian armed forces have liberated 2 villages in the Sumy region, but the situation near Pokrovsk is critical. Trump once again took a jab at Zelensky and said that he wasn't invited to Alaska. Journalists have revealed Viktor Orban's luxurious palace, complete with hectares of land and zebras. Protests against Putin will be held in Alaska. Ukrainian drones have powerfully attacked a plant in Tatarstan that produces Shaheeds. 12 foreign volunteers were killed as a result of a Russian strike on a Ukrainian armed forces training ground. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dimitrovskaya. Right now, let's talk about the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. And let's start with the front lines. There is both good news and bad news. In Donbas, the front is on the verge of collapsing. And let me say right away that our defense forces are doing everything possible to restrain the enemy, but there is a caveat. At the center of events, the Pokrovsk direction remains the most active, and according to volunteer Shaheed, the enemy has managed to make a 10-kilometer breakthrough and cut off the Dobropilya-Kramatorsk highway. The Dobropilya-Kramatorsk highway has been cut off and is under Russian control near the settlement of Novovodiane. The situation is critical. The enemy's successes in the Dobropilya area are also confirmed by deep state analysts. The enemy is not stopping at what they have achieved and continues to build on their success toward the Dobropilya-Kramatorsk highway, consolidating their positions near Novovodiane and Petrovka. Unfortunately, the enemy has identified weak points for further advances, which they will use to make similar attempts. The situation is developing rather chaotically, as the enemy, having found gaps in the defense, is infiltrating deeper, trying to quickly consolidate and amass forces for further advancement. According to former Azov Chief of Staff, Bohdan Tavrakratevich, Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad are almost encircled, while Kostiantynivka is in a semi-encirclement. There is virtually no stable line of combat engagement. Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad are almost encircled, and Kostiantynivka is in a semi-encirclement. The enemy is advancing towards Kramatorsk and Drushkivka. The 1st Azov Corps has already been deployed to Pokrovsk. The military has already taken up defensive positions. Russia's successes in the Dobropilya area, in addition to Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, also threaten Kostiantynivka and Kramatorsk. This is according to military expert Kostiantin Mashovets. According to a soldier with the call sign Bakhmut Demon, the situation is indeed very difficult, but our troops are on the ground and holding Pokrovsk and Konstaka. The situation at the front is difficult, and unfortunately, they might break through at Konstaka and Dobropilya, and they will try to build on their success. We are also holding Pokrovsk in heavy fighting. Ahead of the meeting with Trump, they have thrown everything they can into the battle. Meanwhile, Bild military observer Julian Rupka writes that literally the next few hours will be crucial for the fate of 29% of the Donetsk region territories controlled by Ukraine. According to him, Ukraine has a very small window of time to strike at this wedge from the Dobropilya side and destroy these forces while they are without support from FPV drones. To do this, it is necessary to gather and launch several hundred fighters, reinforced with armored vehicles, in a frontal assault. He believes that if Kyiv does not do this, Russia will quickly bring in drones and armored vehicles, entrench itself, and cut off supplies to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk from Dnipro, leaving the only route through Kharkiv. Along with the critical situation in Donetsk region, it is known that the enemy is preparing for an offensive in the Zaporizhzhia region. The spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, says that Russia is moving airborne troops to this direction. According to intelligence, the enemy is also transferring certain forces and resources to the Zaporizhzhia direction, specifically to the Orkhiv and Huliaipol sectors. The transfer of equipment also indicates that the enemy is preparing for offensive actions. The day before, this was reported by the head of the Center for the Study of Occupation, Petro Andriushchenko. And now, actually, to the good news. The armed forces of Ukraine have liberated 2 more settlements in the Sumy region. We are talking about Stepne and Novokonstantinivka. According to Major of the Armed Forces Andriy Kuchuk, the situation in this direction is stabilizing and we are moving to counter-offensive actions. In the Sumy region, the enemy is really ramping up the narrative, saying, "We're about to march on Sumy, we're about to march on Sumy." Believe me, today the enemy does not have the strength to advance on the regional center. It would require unrealistically great efforts and unrealistically great forces. On our side near Kondrativka, we are already dominating there. Also yesterday, another settlement was liberated. In other words, the defense forces are gradually pushing the enemy out, week by week, from our territory. And so, in the course of this counteroffensive by the armed forces of Ukraine in the Sumy direction, fighters from the URH team unit sank a Russian boat with occupiers. And here's another piece of good news. The armed forces of Ukraine struck the command post of the 85th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces in Donetsk region, eliminating the brigade commander and 5 other Russian officers. Let's thank the Ukrainian armed forces. It's hell on the front lines and they are doing the impossible. And of course, what would it be without Trump? As usual, the US president said so much that it would be enough for hours of discussion. But I'll try to sum it up briefly. First of all, yesterday Trump made such a slip of the tongue that today Russian propagandists are already suggesting returning Alaska. This is the worst thing that has happened, definitely the worst, since World War II. That's why I'm going to talk to Putin, and I'll tell him, you have to stop this war, you have to end it. And he wouldn't dare argue with me. The thing is, during the press conference, Trump twice said he was going to Russia for negotiations, even though the meeting is in Alaska. This is an emergency. And I'm ashamed to be here. I'm going to Putin in Russia on Friday. I don't even want to talk about how dirty our capital has become. Of course, he later realized that something was wrong. But Trump also spoke about Zelensky, or rather about the fact that the president of Ukraine is not expected to be received there. I get along with Zelensky, but I absolutely disagree with his actions. This war should not have happened, and it wouldn't have happened. The next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or with both of them and me. Trump also touched on the territorial ambitions of all sides in the war. And spoiler, here again, Zelensky failed to please him. I'm a bit concerned that Zelensky is talking about the need for constitutional approval. He has permission for war, but he requires approval for exchanging territories. There will be a territorial exchange, and I know this through Russia and through conversations with others. According to Trump, he knows from Russia that there will be territorial exchanges. And Trump says that this is for the good of Ukraine. But Zelensky has made it clear that there will be no territorial exchanges. However, that doesn't stop Trump. Russia has occupied a significant part of Ukraine. They have seized very valuable territories. We will try to return some of the land to Ukraine. They have taken over very important territories. This is the coastline. In real estate, that's the most valuable asset. If you have a lake, a river, or the sea, that's always the most valuable. Many people don't know that Ukraine used to have 1,000 miles of coastline. That's been lost, except for a small section near Odessa. It's a tiny area with just a little bit of water left. The possibility of territorial exchanges and concessions during negotiations is also mentioned by U.S. Defense Secretary Bill Yexel. I think there is a chance to resolve the conflict, and the president has outlined the parameters, as have Steve Witkoff and others. We are on the side of strength in the concept of peace through strength. But at the negotiations, there could be territorial exchanges, there could be concessions, and no one will be satisfied. However, President Trump has promised that he will try to help Ukraine regain its territories, and he hints at some territories along the ocean. Don't ask. And of course, Trump reminds us that he's doing us all a huge favor, because he could have just said goodbye and done nothing. Maybe I'll just go and say good luck. Maybe it won't be resolved. There were statements that supposedly 88% of Ukrainians really want an agreement with Russia. And besides, Kyiv would have fallen in 2 or 3 days as well. And according to Trump, if the Russian generals had gone not through the fields but along the highway, they would have been in Kyiv in 4 hours. They would have been in Kyiv in 4 hours on the highway. But the Russian general decided to go through the fields, and there were heavy rains, so the tanks got stuck in the mud. But let's talk about the facts. Here are those very fields through which Russia advanced toward Kyiv, the M01 highway in the Kyiv region. And it was precisely on the highway that Russian columns were destroyed. Sometimes it seems that Trump only knows about the war from what Putin tells him.
Nitro, this is Udar, I'm listening. Udar, this is Nitro. The 6th Regiment is almost lost. What? I can't report on the 6th Regiment yet. I'm still gathering information. There are a lot of losses. We were waiting. The head of the column fell into an ambush. The regiment commander was killed. I'm still figuring out the rest. Once you sort it out and gather everyone, report back to me. Do you copy? They were firing from over there.
And what do you think about such statements from Trump on the eve of such important negotiations? Alaska residents will stage protests because of the Trump-Putin summit. The political organization Stand Up Alaska has announced a protest a day before the summit, on August 14th. It will be held under the slogan "Alaska stands with Ukraine," and it is directed against, quote, "the presence of the Russian dictator in our great state." We are here to send a clear message to both Donald Trump and Putin. Alaska firmly stands against tyranny, the organization's announcement on Facebook says. It is also known that the protest will take place in Anchorage, the largest city in Alaska. And while EU leaders intend to secure Zelensky's presence at the US-Russia presidential summit in Alaska, Politico, citing sources, reports that European leaders were not invited to the summit on August 15th, so they are, quote, spending a lot of time talking among themselves. At the same time, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban stated that an EU-Russia summit needs to be organized. But Orban, incidentally, was the only EU leader who did not sign the statement in support of Ukraine, which had previously been presented by the leaders of the European Union. The leaders of 26 EU countries adopted a statement in support of Ukraine ahead of the Trump-Putin summit. The document emphasizes that borders cannot be changed by force. The path to peace cannot be determined without Ukraine, and negotiations are only possible if there is a ceasefire or a reduction in hostilities. So, according to Orban, he could not support the document for 3 reasons. The statement attempts to set conditions for a meeting to which EU leaders are not invited. He called the very fact that the EU was left on the sidelines unfortunate, and added that the only thing worse would be if Europe started giving instructions from the sidelines. In his opinion, the only reasonable step for the EU is to initiate its own summit with Russia, following the example of negotiations between the US and Russia. Well, if you don't mind, I'll refrain from commenting on that, but I want to ask you, what do you think of Orban's proposal? Is it fair, or is it, as they say, just wishful thinking? More than $13 billion, that's how much Russia has spent on shelling Ukraine, and that's just in the first 7 months of 2025. Forbes magazine calculated how much it costs Russia to attack Ukraine and found out that at least $5 billion of this amount is spent on Shaheeds. In these 7 months, Russia has launched, just listen to this, 29,000 of them.
The exact ratio of real Shaheeds to their imitators is unknown. In May, Russia was producing 2,700 Shaheeds and 2,500 imitators per month, as Forbes Ukraine was told by the Duar. During the June 17th attack, out of 440 drones, about 280 were real Shaheeds. According to the Air Force, the estimated ratio is about 55 to 65% in favor of real Shaheeds. Russia has launched approximately 16 to 19,000 of these drones since the beginning of the year. Each of them carries a warhead of up to 90 kilograms. In total, between 1,400 and 1,100 tons of explosives have arrived in Ukraine on Shaheeds since the beginning of the year.
Russia launched the most Shaheeds at Ukraine in July, over 6,000. And right now, about 3,500 drones are on standby in Russia. And according to monitoring data, these are only the ones already at launch sites.
Up to 3,500 strike UAVs, Geran-2 Gerber, Shahed 136 Parody are stationed at all launch sites.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
I don't want to scare anyone, but I have a feeling these drones will be used very actively after the negotiations on August 15th. What do you think? Now, make yourself comfortable, because what follows is a very interesting story of hypocrisy and corruption, starring Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. So, Hungarian journalists have discovered and showcased Orban's truly luxurious estate, without any exaggeration. The mansion is estimated to be worth around 30 million euros.
Previously, there was a modern farm operating on this land. However, now there is nothing here that even hints at agricultural activity. The stables have been replaced by multi-story buildings with elevators, and the estate now features an underground parking lot and a swimming pool.
Although Orban himself claims that this is his father's farm. So does that mean his father is breeding zebras? Well, because that's exactly what was spotted on the property. There is footage of the estate during its construction phase from several years ago. Now Orban is more cautious. To prevent information leaks about the estate, workers have their phones confiscated and are threatened when they enter the property. I wonder, did he earn this through his friendship with Putin, or did he appropriate Hungarian and European funds? By the way, people and journalists have already come to Orban's estate, and they even brought zebras with them. albeit inflatable ones. Orban's estate in Hatvanpusta with its palm garden and private zoo is still under construction. Now I have a question. Will they finish building it, given all the publicity? And what do you think of Orban's house? Actually, write your thoughts in the comments. It'll be interesting to read them. Say what you will, but good news can come out of Russia, exciting and really good news. And what really livens up the everyday monotony of the Russian swamp are good drones.
Look down there. There.
Last night, some good drones dropped by in Stavropol and hit the monocrystal plant. For reference, that's one of the world's main producers of synthetic sapphires for the optoelectronics industry. So this is an enterprise of the Russian military-industrial complex.
They hit it on the third try. See, the yellow one is lit up.
Sapphire is needed to protect optics, sights, thermal images, as well as for laser systems, UAV cameras, and devices used in aviation and space technology.
And in the city of Yaroslavl, a significant paint and coatings factory was reportedly hit.
Something there is burning really intensely.
In addition, drones also attacked Tatarstan and are targeting the well-known workshop where Russian drones are assembled.
Should I zoom in or what?
Well, no further comment is needed here. I really like how it's all burning. The construction of an ammunition factory in Ukraine is being delayed by bureaucracy. This was stated by Armin Paperger, CEO of the German defense conglomerate Rheinmetall. He says that the pace of construction of the ammunition factory in Ukraine is not progressing as quickly as they would like, but its capacity will be twice as large as previously expected. Paperger also said that Rheinmetall's German facility in Unterlüß, with a capacity of 350,000 shells per year, is already preparing for technical launch, while the Ukrainian one is still under construction.
The first contract from the Ukrainian side has been signed. I am not satisfied with the pace of work so far, but the reason is not only on our side. Do you know that we are building a new factory? And in Ukraine, we started at about the same time as in Germany. In Germany, we are already ready, but in Ukraine, we are not yet. Unfortunately, the level of bureaucracy in Ukraine is very high. But there is also a positive side. Now they want to double the capacity of the first factory. That's good news. Another plus is that they are ready to move forward and increase production volumes. But right now, there is not enough funding.
12 foreign volunteers were killed as a result of a Russian strike on a Ukrainian armed forces training ground near Kropyvnytsky in the Kirovohrad region on July 21st. This information was published by the New York Times. In particular, among the dead are citizens of the USA, Colombia, Taiwan, and Denmark. Meanwhile, a recruit from Florida told reporters that after the strike, he saw many wounded and at least 15 dead. It is also known that the strike caused a fire at an ammunition depot, which led to further explosions while aid was being provided. Meanwhile, the representative of the International Legion of Ukrainian Military Intelligence, Main Intelligence Directorate, Volodymyr Kaminsky, only confirmed to journalists that an investigation is currently underway. Officially, the losses are not being disclosed. Please like this video to support what we do and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. See you soon.